welcome to GDB World. In today's video we will take a look at how we can use our own models when developing 7 Days to Die mods. In today's example I've made my character a spawnable zombie that can be triggered with Twitch integration commands. Resources for making your own can be found in the description below, and if you enjoyed the video and wish to support the channel, please like and subscribe. And with that, let's jump straight into the video. Step 1 is to download Xyth tutorial project, as we will be reusing the in-game animations for our model. Next we're going to need a model. It can be either OBJ or FBX. Since we're going to be using Mixamo for rigging the character, it will all be converted to FBX at the end, so it's not really a problem if you've got an older model. Once you're in Mixamo, it's nice and easy. Just hit the upload button and then drag your file into the space and it will start processing. It will automatically give us animations. You sort of can preview how the rigging went and how it's deforming. We're not actually going to use any of these animations because we're going to use the character controller in Unity itself. So we're actually just going to cross that out, and then we're going to then download it and select FBX for Unity. Once we select T-pose, and then we'll hit the download button. And then we can jump over to Unity. So this is the tutorial scene. It comes with a few templates that you can sort of use as reference for creating your characters or adjusting them to be functional with the game. So first thing we do is just drag the model into the assets folder, and then we want to move it into our inspector so we can sort of see how big it is compared to other, like the in-game characters. Not all models are modeled to life size, so in my case it was modeled in say centimeters, not meters, so I have to sort of adjust the model's scale factor by 12. Once we're happy with the scaling, we can jump over to the rig tab, set it to humanoid, and then configure it. Now Unity will do its best to configure it for you, but if it hasn't configured, then it's just nice and simple. We're just going to go and drag in all of the appropriate joints and stuff to the appropriate locations. Got a wee screenshot on there that you can just pause because the names of your joints will be the sort of same as mine since we're both using Mixamo. Just hit apply and then we are good. Next we're going to be looking at the animation controller. So this is where all the animations are going to come from. It's actually got all of the ones that are currently in the game. We're going to use the A20 zombie controller 02. Now you can clone this and rename it, but you don't need to because it's not really going to impact anything, and it's still nice and tidy. It's already in its own folder as it is. So then we'll just run some tests, change the animations, see how it looks, and if we're still pretty happy with it, then we can sort of proceed. Now we're just going to be creating an empty game object, and we're going to call it the large collider. So this is the collider that the game uses when cars run into the character. And then we just want to make sure we tag the collider itself with large entity blocker, and then set it onto a layer. So in this case it's the large entity blocker layer. The reason for that is layers remove that object from being sort of interacted with by objects that are told to ignore that layer. Next we just want to put a capsule collider onto the model, and we can just scale that. Try to keep it thin-ish because we do have quite big hitboxes with the vehicles, so it can be quite easy for them to just get hit even though they're nowhere near, and it can just look a bit strange. Then we're just going to come over to the nurse, and we're just going to copy over the icon tag with the same naming convention and everything. Just move that above the model. So this naming tags used for Twitch integration when you spawn in a zombie. That's where the name will show up. Next, we want to create an empty game object called origin. Mainly because I don't have an origin joint, which is normally the sort of controller platform that the models sit on. And it's usually the primary parent for all the joints. So rather than having it parented from the hips, we want it parented from the origin, which is usually at the base of the feet there. Once we've parented that in there, we can then create our footsteps, and once again we just sort of parent that straight under the origin there, and it will have the same sort of transforms as the origin as well. Now we can start tagging up all the different joints and objects. So we're going to put on enemy and then ebp bipod root for the origin, and that's essentially the naming convention for all these tags for the different joints. So it's ebp something. So just follow along and pause the video if it's going a little bit too quickly as well. It's worth double checking these as well, as it's quite easy just to select the wrong one by accident. I did it a couple times myself, so just take your time. Now that the tagging's done, we can move on to adding the material or textures onto the model. So we do this by just clicking to a folder, right clicking, create new material. Just give it a name, and then we can select the type of shader that we want. So for myself, I was using the Autodesk Interactive because I have a roughness specular setup for most of the models that I tend to make. You can either drag in the textures or select them like I am now. Only thing to note down is obviously your albedo is your base color or the color texture. Then we've got your metallic, which is usually just a black and white texture. Roughness, again, it's usually that's your specularity, and it's sort of grey, black, white sort of area. Generally you don't get really too many blacks because that'd be too strong. Then you got your normal texture, which is that sort of blue one, and then you've got your height map, which is generally a grayscale map of some sort, and then you've got your ambient occlusion maps, which is sort of how the light catches the objects and casts its shadows and stuff. So it's like crevasses and things like that, if you're not too familiar with it. Finally, we can just apply the material to the model, so it's just nice and easy, just drag it onto the model itself. I tend to work inside the prefab, so you just double click on the prefab, and you can just change the original object without having to recreate it or anything. It's just a bit tidier. And now we can move on to making our ragdoll. So the ragdoll system's the system that it uses for any of the damage the zombies take, or just the on death ragdoll animation. So we just go ahead and assign each joint sort of top to bottom. Once we've done this and we hit apply, it will make our colliders for us, and then we'll just have to adjust those colliders because they're not always accurate, especially if the model isn't exactly human. Just assigning the elbow, which is the left forearm. It'll be the same for the right arm. And then we're just assigning our spine. It's usually spine 2. And then we put in our head. For the mass, just put 200, 80, 100, just whatever you want. Just have a wee play around with it. Does depend. And then now we've got our colliders. So what we can do is we just go through all of them and adjust them. So there's the edit collider button, which is the sort of joint button here. And just move it around till it's in the correct spot. Try not to get them to merge too much, because it can just send them flying when they do ragdoll. In my case, it's already a very silly character anyway, so happy just to let him fly. One thing you'll see in a minute when I move on to do the head, it doesn't actually fit correctly to his body, not the way that I sort of want it to. So what I actually end up doing is you can create an empty game object and end up parenting it to the head joint. You do just have to make sure you tag it so it's got the same tag as the joint itself. But what we can do then, it just allows us to reposition it a little bit better so that we can get more in the dead center of where we want it, or even rotate it if we wanted. Then we move on to the skin mesh bounds. So if you've got a model that's got multiple objects, then there'll be multiple of these to change. But we want to make these as big as possible so that we don't see any effects where the model disappears. So just go ahead and do this for each model if there's multiple. Now we move on to setting up the mods folder for our modelet. What we can do is we can just go to the Steam library and go to the properties, and then we can press browse. It will take us directly to the location that we need to go. Click on the common tab, and I would copy the 7 days game and paste it, so then you've got 2 copies of the game. Name one mods and one normal so that you can play both versions. And then we're going to create a mods folder and then create another folder inside the mods folder with the name of what you want to call your mod. If you're following along, this is where you'd paste in the XMLs I've provided. Let me jump back into Unity. We'll go to our prefab, we'll right click on it and go build to multi-platform. This is going to go into our resource folder. The name does matter because you're going to have to use the same or remember what the name is when you're editing your XMLs as well. Once you hit save, we'll then browse back to your mods folder and open up the mod info XML. And we will need to make sure that we change the name of the value to the name of the folder that you've created. So in my case it was Dylan's mods. Then we jump into the entity classes XML. And the highlighted line is the line that finds your model. So you want to make sure it's the same name as what you exported it as. Same for the game events, just change it to the name of your character. And then for Twitch, it's just giving it a name that people can use to spawn your character for the most part. So then we can jump in and test it. So this is sort of what it would look like. So generally they'd go hashtag spawn and then underscore whatever the object is. You can really make it anything you want, but then after they place that, if they've got enough points that they've earned from sitting in the Twitch, then it should then spawn the zombie onto the player like so. And with that brings today's video to a close. If you'd like to see the mod in action, head over to twitch.tv/Ambam. Thank you for watching and have a lovely day.